Okay, guys. Me, Olivia, and Aaron are all on tight schedules today, so we're gonna get started right away. And also, it's gonna be a quick one, so hoping to kind of wrap this up right after Erin does her little tutorial. Um, so probably by 5:30, hopefully. At least, I mean, I doubt it'll even take that long, but yeah. So just a quick little catch up today, and then um. I think we don't have another one for, I don't know, I have to check the schedule, but
I think I
Until
saw
the
week
last one.
8.
yeah,
Yeah.
until the last one. So we're already on week 5 or 4.
We're on week 5.
Mm.
Next
Okay.
week will be guess the design
Okay.
challenge. And
That's what I was
then
thinking. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I was like, I know we're not doing Guess the Design Challenge yet, but week 5, usually we do Guess the Design, or sometimes it depends on the pattern. Um, okay, well then, Aaron, I will hand over the floor to you.
Yeah. All right. Hi everyone. I'll start with a cute little story. I have to run tonight because my husband is like packing and we're trying to get the house ready because he's going to Policon, like a little Polaroid convention in New York, tomorrow, which I think is adorable, which is probably how he feels about me when I say I'm going to QuiltCon, that it's just adorable. Um, so we just got to get the house in order, got to get him out the door at like 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. Woof. So thanks for kind of a shorter little Zoom call today. I will walk you through some of the units that we are sewing, and don't hesitate to ask questions because I got to run. So I have prepped these units. This is the C1, the C2, and the B1 unit already. So you've got these two pieces, and they should be mirror images of each other. So you don't want two of either one. You want one of each, two from each like set of fabric that are mirror images of each other. When I was working through writing the directions and figuring out how to best like make this the most straightforward for you all, like help you wrap your heads around it, and also like maintain the mystery of the design. The way that I wrote it in the pattern might feel a little repetitive, but it's the way that made the most sense in my brain. And you'll see kind of why I like describing this method as a stitch and flip method, because it's so descriptive. You can use it to describe, to talk about stitching together units that are not just snowball units, but also that where you just kind of lay units in awkward orientations together, stitched down the line, and you flip it over. So I want to get my view so I can see me, so I know what I am showing you. Taylor, can you spotlight me? When I go to speaker view, I see
Yes,
your.
I can.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
There you
I all of a sudden just got a lot bigger in my face. That was a surprise. I did not find that like chain piecing one unit from different plates is how I'll refer to them. I did not find that to be I found that confusing. So I worked on one plate at a time, and I would do a sub block 3, and then I would sew a sub block 4 from that same plate, and then I would move to the next set of fabrics. So that's how I'll describe what I'm doing right now. And if something else works for you, then something else works for you. Let me tilt this down. So I liked to have these set up in kind of opposite directions, so I knew that I was doing the correct thing to the correct unit. I have this kind of step-by-step process in the pattern of measure down 5 inches, draw a diagonal line, and I'll explain why we do that here. So this unit that we've just sewn, the C1, 2, and B1 unit, is 5 inches. And so we want to stitch and flip these units to this. But because this is kind of a long space to travel with no lines, that's where this kind of measure down 5 inches comes and draw that line. So ultimately we want to end up with units that look like this. A little better. And this unit will stitch down this line and will look like this. So again, when you're looking at it, they are mirror images of each other, not identical units. If you are brave of heart, the fastest way to do this would be to lay out your piece here. And I can just peek under this fabric here to see where this line of where this edge of this unit intersects it. And I could make a little mark. Oh, this ruler is not big enough. I could make a little mark there and then draw my diagonal line from the corner of the top unit to the corner of this unit. Where is it? And so now you could sew down that drawn line and you should intersect. The line comes here and you should intersect right at that corner. I am more particular than that. So I will instead double check that this is 5 inches down from the top. Oh my gosh, that spot, it was spot on. So that the less particular method works pretty well. And then I would draw my diagonal line using that measured mark. Same thing on this unit. We're looking for the less particular way is looking for where this edge meets this edge of the unit. If I flip it back here, you're looking for this very intersection, but on the other side. So maybe you could kind of fold this back. Maybe you wanted to, you could give it a little crease and then draw your diagonal line using that crease mark. Again, I happen to be more particular than that, so I'm going to measure 5 inches here. Mark that. That's looking good. Draw my diagonal line. And now we're ready to sew. I'd recommend putting pins in before you move it too much so you're not disturbing the patchwork. This corner here, these are the ones that we'll end up trimming off after this stitch and flip. So since we're here, we have our ruler and our marking tool. We can go ahead and get our little bonus half square triangle. I'll show you. It's got a tiny bit of patchwork in it, so you could keep that and make a little patchwork remnant to go on the back of the quilt if you wanted, or to use as like an accompanying pillow if you get enough units. That could be something fun. Or you could
How
trim
far
it
away
down.
is that line from the
I'm
one that you
drawing
just
this line a 1/2 inch away from my first drawn line. That will leave me with a 1/4 inch seam allowance between both of them, which is what we need. All right, let me grab my pins. Oof. I might just throw one in each, and I'm just futzing to make sure that I haven't disturbed it too much, that all of my pieces are aligned nicely. Maybe I'll do 2 each. This is kind of a longer line than I would want to sew it with just one pin. Now I'm nervous again. Like I said last week, these stitch and flips are not my strongest. I'm not the best at them, so sometimes they end up really nice. And sometimes, you know, I have to seam rip it and take it apart. So, for the purposes of our demonstration, I'll just sew down the main line that we're concerned about and not this secondary line. I'll point you towards my machine if you think we can see it. There you go. Oh, look, there's my little unit from last week hanging out right there. I almost said what it was and I panicked. Can't talk about what it is. So again, I'm still using all of the like visual information I have about my machine to sew just one thread width away from this. Hopefully you've got your preferred method down now that we've done a bunch already. Don't forget your leader so you don't eat your fabric. Let's see how this one came out. I think I started out a little right on the line, and then I gave myself a little bit more room by the end of it. And so now the way that you can double check this, flip it back and see, like, do the edges line up? And honestly, that doesn't look too bad. What would happen if you did not line up is this edge would not be this intersection of these fabrics would not be very straight. One would be kind of farther down or farther up, or there'd be a weird gap. Let's see. You can also use like a straight line on your mat to see how well you stitched that out. I don't think I like this. I don't know what's happening here. I wonder if I misaligned something, if my line was crooked. So that's about a 1/4 inch short there. After all is pressed and everything. Maybe closer to a 1/8 of an inch, and when I put some tension on it, you can see I'm using this line on my cutting mat to see how straight this unit is coming out. And that could be problematic over the course of several blocks. So I would spend some time figuring out how this block is looking, because if I pull it slightly differently, then it seems to like balance out. Now it's straight on that line, but I'm getting some gap here at the other end when I pull it straight over here. It's hard to see on this screen, but I'm pulling up maybe like a 1/16 of an inch right here from my straight line. So I would probably seam rip that and start over. You don't have to if you are not that particular. Let me try my hand at this second one and see if we can get any better. I'll kind of intentionally sew too far away from the line so you can see what that looks like. Okay. So I've sewn more like 3 thread widths away from the drawn line. Let's see what that ends up looking like. Yeah, I hear you now. This is a good example of how this can get misaligned. If I pressed this now, you can see this background fabric here is like another 1/16 of an inch like too high, which means that we can expect the same sort of misalignment down here. There's like a little gap because I've sewn too far away from the corner. Now that patchwork has a little gap. So that could be your sign that you are sewing with too scant of a seam allowance and need to go back and address that. So I'm just taking a look at this straight line business again to see how this plays out when I open it up. And it's actually, despite being too short of a seam allowance, it does give me a nice straight line over here. But this, I would recommend. Well, honestly, I'll say when I made my version, I did have several pieces like this, and I just kind of accounted for that when I sewed everything up. This unit, when I was sewing this unit to another piece, I sewed it with just a smaller seam allowance, and when I sewed this unit to that same piece, I just remembered that they're misaligned, so I can account for that while I'm eyeballing everything under the machine. So you can experiment. You know, there are a lot of these blocks for you to try this out on. But I think this one is aligned nicely. I just need to re-sew this line. And this one is misaligned, and I did not like how that came out.
You mentioned when you were sewing
Mhm.
that you started out pretty good and then you slowly like went a little bit further. Is that contributing to the kind of
I wonder,
V
I
shape?
think so, because if looking at the back now, this right here looks nice and aligned, but you can see that this lighter color is starting to like pull away from the unit. So it could just be that instead of a perfectly 45-degree stitching line, that I've kind of wandered off from that angle. So I encourage everybody, you know, you do you when it comes to how much futzing you want to do with these pieces, but those are some things to keep in mind as you are sewing these. You know, before you cut, before I start just slicing this off and moving on, take a look at what this what you've sewn by taking it over to your cutting board, laying it out on a straight line, seeing what happens when you fold the fabric over. You can look at it from the front, and I can tell here, like I think there's too much fabric here because when I pull it taut, there's some excess here. It doesn't want to come lay flat unless I pull it directly out of the way. And then you can take a look at it again from the other side when you kind of open this up. This is kind of a nice line over here, but this is not a nice line over here. But this is a good example to show you what that bonus HST will look like if you sew that second line. You'll lose a little bit here to the seam allowance, but you'll get this little pocket of patchwork right there. And it will look like this. So again, you could keep this. This could be kind of fun, little improv HST for you to use all together in some other projects. I think these are some of the other smaller bonus HSTs from the units we sewed last week, so you could kind of put them all together. if you don't like this, I think you can actually trim this larger, the bonus HST from this week. You could trim it down to match the sizes from last week. And then you would get rid of that Patrick, and then you do have the same size to use for a smaller project. Any questions on any of that from anybody?
I don't have a question, but I do have a would this work? Well, I guess that is a question. Would this work? You drew your line and then pinned it. And in between those, you readjusted to make sure that your pieces were still lined up properly before you pinned. Could you potentially glue baste those two together and then draw your line?
I'm so glad you
with
said
like
that,
maybe
because I
little
had
dabs
thought
of corners on the corners.
That's true. My thought that I wanted to share about glue basting, which I completely forgot about until you said that word, is I actually think these pieces would be really good to practice your glue basting if that's a skill that you've wanted to develop or a tool that you've wanted to play with. Pen and Paper Patterns, Lindsay, is that her name? I can't remember. But she glue bastes every seam, even if it's just, a straight patchwork to patchwork, and her piecing always looks beautiful. And so these would be great pieces to experiment on with that, since it is very straightforward. When you glue baste, you are kind of committing to pressing to the side, since that seam allowance is so glued together. I've tried to peel it open to press open, and it's just like the time you spend peeling it open is the time that you would spend futzing with pins anyway, so I don't suggest that. But for these pieces, I think it would be good to try that. If I have not tried it, so I can't speak to the success of it, but I think it would work. It would be nice because you're sewing on the bias, so you could definitely help keep things straight. I would recommend, remember that you can kind of see everything here. I would recommend definitely drawing the second line if you're going to get the bonus HST, and putting your dots of glue, keeping your dots of glue in between these two lines. If you put it on this side or this side, you'll ruin the patchwork. You will have glued the patchwork together, not the seam allowance together. But maybe, how would I go about doing that? Because if I've got my drawn line and it's not attached yet, you'll have to kind of do some eyeballing to.
I think in my head, I see it as I glue baste my pieces first. Then I mark down 5 inches and then I draw my line. That way, after you've drawn it, it's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about it shifting.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think that could be really interesting. Let me grab my glue real quick. Okay, glue. I use this Glue Based It. Roxanne, I think, is the brand. Sometimes the little thingy dries up on me, but I found just sticking a needle in to be just fine. So in this scenario, Olivia is picturing, let's pretend that these are not sewn yet. How do we pretend? Let me seam rip this real quick so we can, I don't have to mime it. I've never tried to seam rip so fast. So for folks who have never glue basted before, you'll want to put a little dot in the areas that we'll talk about, and then you want to give it a minute to dry and set it with your iron. that will make sure that you're not sewing over liquid glue with your presser foot and like smushing it everywhere. And we really do mean like the tiniest of dots. Because again, as you send this under your machine and as you put your iron over it, if you have too much liquid, it starts to ooze everywhere. And then you might end up with a result that you don't want. But if you have one of these like fine line applicator tips, it's actually really hard to apply too much glue. There we go. Okay, so in this circumstance, what we're doing is there's no drawn lines. We can pretend that much. You might actually need to just figure out where that 5-inch point is to start, because you want to put your glue dot below it. So maybe align it quickly, give it just a little finger press right there. So you know, because there's no markings, you'll need some sort of visual representation on the front. And on this side of the unit, you'll want to put just like a little dab of glue. Yeah, there's a liquid glue in there. Okay. I'm going to put just the littlest dab of glue. Maybe in these two corners. I like to do too much. So I'm going to put a couple more dots down around the line. And again, like make sure you're referencing the diagrams in this so you are continue to place everything in the correct orientation, because it could get confusing if you're flipping things over and over with different sets of fabric and different plates and things. So what I'm just checking for here is to make sure that this fabric is aligned on this end and this fabric is aligned on this end. And because we have kind of this previously stitched line and drawn line, I can use that information to assume my glue dots are like right here. So let me go stamp this with my iron real quick. Did we stick? Yeah. Yeah, we did. You can just test it like that. And from here, now we're doing that same kind of visual cue. I have my crease here under this circumstance. I can also kind of peer around the fabric to find where the top right corner of the bottom unit is intersecting the right edge here, and where this corner intersects the edge down here. I have to redraw it because the iron heat made my disappearing ink disappear. All right, let's try this. And it's not on the same spot as the last time I drew my line. But maybe in particular, I'm gonna fix that. I think I just put my ruler in the wrong spot. There you go. All right, fingers crossed. I mean, this should work. In theory, this works. It all just comes down to like your skill, your knowledge about your machine, and your seam allowance. I would say this is a good method to use once you've got the hang of it. Like, probably don't do this for your first block, because if you mess it up, seam ripping it and readjusting would actually be kind of tough. Oh, but that's looking a lot better. If I give it some tension and pull it out, using a straight line. I like that a lot more. I like that a lot more. There you go. Give that a little press. You can even give it a little finger press to the side if you want. Give it a little finger press open. I'm going to say this, I like open. I'm pretty sure I wrote that in this pattern. Maybe because these dots are so small and because it's fresh, I can peel these apart. Look at that. Just if you do that, be careful of putting your iron directly on it, of picking up some additional glue. So I tended to do this and then sew my HSTs, but I was not on a weekly schedule trying to get this done in a particular amount of time. So, you know, you do what you have time for, you do what you have interest in doing, and only be as particular as you want to be. Any other questions? If not, at the end of this, you'll have 2 mirrored blocks with some kind of accent patchwork here and this nice 45-degree line here. The other, just so you know, just as some like background information on pattern designing, the other option would have been to cut this piece entirely smaller, so not this long piece, but to cut this piece to be 5 by 5. And then you'd have a much easier time. I could tell you, draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on the square, line it up and stitch down the line. And then you could just do this open flap, or this stitch and flip method there. But then because of the design, you'd have to sew on this additional piece of fabric. And I don't like that because that's a 1/2 inch of fabric that you didn't need to use for a seam allowance. And I don't mind spending time futzing with my piecing. But you might get a different designer who makes a similarly pieced thing, and there's just this HST here and a seam where you would sew on another rectangle. It's all down to how we like to write patterns, how we like to use our fabric, how we like to sew. And on this pattern, as a lot of you saw with the fat quarters, we did not have an extra 5 inches of fabric in that or 1/2 inch of fabric in that fat quarter. So we had to be as economic. I had to be as economic as possible in the figuring out the piecing. But when you're done with this, you can stick these up here with your units from last week. And hopefully by next week, you will have more information on what it is that we're building there. I intentionally didn't put them in any specific order, so you can't get any clues from what I'm putting together. No?
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the guessing looks like next week with all of the pieces finished up and
I feel like it
ready
could go
to.
either 2 ways. I feel like everyone can guess closely, or they just are a wild array of guesses. You never know.
We've had that. We've had
I
where
know.
everyone guessed incorrectly, and
Yeah.
they were all very good guesses. They would have made fantastic quilts, and some people do follow through with their guesses, and they make a quilt entirely different than what it's intended to be. So it's a good
Yeah.
little like play exercise of like, here are some blocks to play around with, and let's see what shapes you can come up with.
Like a
I
puzzle.
hope somebody like discovers a completely new layout for this.
Usually, I mean, I don't know if Diane is in here, but she usually creates like a whole new layout and then typically goes with the layout that she comes up with. So it's fun. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time tonight, everyone. I have to run. I don't mean that to like end the call anyway. If Taylor and Olivia, you've got more notes to share, but I gotta
Okay.
take care of my husband. I gotta take care of
Yeah,
him.
no, this is good.
I'll
Yeah, if
be
no
on
one has any
Discord.
questions,
Yeah,
I don't see any in the chat.
great. I'll be around on Discord, and then we'll see you. I'll see you all again on week 8. I think is our next call.
Yeah, and week
Okay.
8 is the book club chat. So I have not started the book yet, but I plan on starting today or tomorrow.
Stories are pretty quick to get through, so you could easily
Yeah.
commit to one story a day and be good.
That's probably what I plan on doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll meet again for week 8 for show and tell and book club stuff.
Yeah.
Yay.
And quick plug, not Toad Circle related, but Moonbeam releases tomorrow. So if you guys had your eye on that pattern.
Yes. And
There
Aaron, you
is
just
a
released a block pattern, right?
I did release a block pattern. Both of these have curves. Don't be afraid of curves.
yes, yeah. Mine has curves too.
Curve
So
season.
yeah.
Okay. All right. See you all later.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.